Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1964. We're going to be taking a look at the Animals and they're going to be performing The House of the Rising Sun. Now, I've just filmed this and edited it and uploaded it to YouTube and it's been blocked again on copyrights. It seems like the big labels now are just outright blocking a lot of songs and performances. So the link is going to be in the description below again, so you guys can click on that, watch the performance through. I'm also going to put the link at the top of the comments section. For reference, I jump in at 2 minutes, so you can stop the video there if you want to. Apologies for having to do it like this again, but it's just the way things are going at the moment on YouTube. Hopefully on Wednesday I'll be able to find a video that isn't going to be blocked, but fingers crossed, we'll see what happens in the future. So I'm going to let the original video that I've just recorded run, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. So let's get these guys up on screen and see how they get on. I'm just going to jump in here because the Animals, one of those bands part of the British invasion. I've done quite a few videos now on bands around at the same time and were responsible for invading the charts over in the USA during that period. But a lot of guitars were around at the time in terms of bands who just had a guitar, maybe two guitars and a bassist, but having those keys in there as well adds so much to the sound. And another thing that stands out is this guy on lead vocals, Eric Burden, because he's got such a powerful voice in that chest register, but also the way that he started the track, starting an octave lower means that he's going to have such a dramatic change dynamically when he then gets into that upper octave and starts belting it out in chest voice. On this track, he just absolutely nails it, and his voice is so dynamic that that's the only voice you need to hear. And with other bands at the time, sometimes when you do hear harmony vocals and you're starting to compare bands and songs that have harmony vocals on them with songs that are just one guy singing, is sometimes a bit misleading, that the amount of work this one singer has done is competing with the work of three other vocalists on another track. And he's got what we would class now as a classic rock voice or a hard rock voice. The way that he leans into that sound and gets that vocal distortion, that grit in there. But the unique sound is achieved because it's over a clean backing. There's no distorted guitars here. We've got essentially a classic folk song in the background with clean guitar picking going on, but then we've got an effective heavy rock lead vocal over the top, which makes it sound so standalone, so unique to have those two things mixed together. And just quickly about the song, because it's one of those tracks that's been covered by so many different artists. I think the Animals version is what a lot of people will know as the main version, or the one that at least sold the most. And nobody knows who wrote this in the first place, because it's been around for that amount of time that it's been passed from generations to generations of folk singers and folk players. It was just a standard that they used to play through. It was first recorded in 1933 by Clarence Tom Ashley and Gwen Foster, so that was the first time it was actually got down as a record or as something that you could play back. And the Animals, when they released their version of this in 1964, it was a monster hit, going to #1 in the UK and #1 in the USA as well. There are lots of different reasons for that, but Eric's vocal, like I mentioned, was a huge reason behind the attitude and the way that he could connect with the lyrics, but also that aggressive vocal. It was something that was new. It's certainly a new sound for the 60s, and he pulled it off so well. Obviously, the rest of the band absolutely nailed it as well. Alan, who I've already mentioned on the keys solo, but we also had Hilton Valentine, who's picking through these chords, and it's one of those tracks that you don't realize how difficult it is until you actually play through the whole track and try not to miss a pick, because those arpeggios that are constantly going through, Hilton nailing it the whole time. And we've also got Alan arpeggiating the chords on the keys as well, so it really fills out that sound. And also takes a bit of pressure off the guitar from Hilton, because if he does miss a pick, it's not going to matter too much because the sound is still going to be full. As you can hear the screaming women in the background, this is all around the time of Beatlemania, and these guys actually moved down to London in 1964, and before that they were playing in Newcastle upon Tyne, where they were formed, their hometown, and they were going down really well up there, so they decided to make the move. They also had a connection with Giorgio Gamelski, who was the Yardbirds manager at the time, and with his advice they moved down to London and became part of the British invasion into the USA. And they only just made it because 1964 was when it all really kicked off. Let's get back into the video. And there we have it. So that performance by Eric vocally, especially at the time, there is so much attitude in his vocal delivery, but also just the way that he acts when he sings. And it is so unique for the time because there are so many other bands that were so prim and proper and so straight down the line, but this guy, you could tell that he's got attitude. And I just want to point out as well the way that John Steele is accenting all of those arpeggios that are picked on the guitar and played on the keys on his drum kit, and it triples up the effect of that rhythm and really does highlight the fact that we are in 6/8 here, which is a time signature. You can count it as 2 sets of 3 if you want to, and we're going 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, or you can count it as 6, as in 6/8, going 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. And this is something that will set it apart from other songs at the time as well, because a lot of the other songs would have been in 4/4, so it gives it a different groove and it will make it more interesting to listen to, even if you don't know why it's more interesting to listen to. It's just that change up in time signature. It's just slightly different to what people are used to hearing. I'm just talking about these guys in the British invasion because they were one of the bands that made it over to the USA and performed live for their fans over there. They also appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show, which this is the video that we're looking at now, and they performed in theatres in New York. So they managed to get over there and increase exposure for themselves, but also to drive up those record sales by performing live. And in 1966, MGM released the best of the Animals, and that went on to become their biggest selling album in the USA. And at this time, John Steele left the band, and the last hit that they had as the Animals was called Don't Bring Me Down. Unfortunately, by the end of the year, the band had split up and everyone went their own separate ways. Eric started working on his solo album, and at that time, Chas Chandler said that the financial side of the band was a total shambles, and it was another example of a band back in the 60s who didn't actually make a lot of money at all, considering the amount of singles and albums that they sold. And Chas actually went on to manage Jimi Hendrix and did some production work for Slade. I think it was just that the band were financially naive, and I think also they've claimed mismanagement by Michael Jeffrey, who was their manager. And just quickly to mention the dispute between the name of the Animals between John Steele and Eric Burdon as well, because Eric wanted to use that, but he wasn't allowed because John had registered it and trademarked it many, many years earlier. And it was found that because Eric called himself Eric Burdon and the Animals, he therefore made a different name out of the Animals and wasn't allowed to just use the Animals as a name. And Eric did argue that it was agreed within the band many years ago that they could use it independently if they wanted to, but unfortunately that wasn't seen in the eyes of the law. Because it was registered under John Steele, then he was the only guy that could use it, and he had to give specific permission for that. It was then later found on appeal that Eric could use the Animals as a band name, and it's one of those things that to me does seem a bit stupid that somebody who was the lead singer for the band can now no longer use the name of the band. And it's one of those cases that you think it doesn't really need to go to court. I don't want this video to go on for too long, but just quickly before I finish, I want to mention this story about the second incarnation of the band in 1968 that included Andy Summers, who is probably best known for his work with the Police. But the band in 1968 did split up, but their double album called Love Is was still released, and a couple of singles were still released as well. And the reason for the separation has largely been put down to the fact that they had a tour booked in Japan, and it took them a couple of months to get their visas together, so it was delayed by a couple of months. So when they eventually got over there, the manager then met with the promoters for the tour. So when the manager went to meet with the promoters, he didn't realize that they were the Yakuza, who are the mafia in Japan. So their tour had been organized by the mafia, and they were 2 months late coming to the country. So the manager was held at gunpoint and forced to sign a promissory note for $25,000. But because he knew they didn't speak English, he put on this promissory note that he was under duress. And they then threatened the band and the manager that if they didn't leave the country the next day, they would be killed. So, of course, they literally bolted to the airport the next day, and they left everything there. All of their equipment, all the amps, they just got out of there and lived to fight another day. And that's probably a good enough reason to split up. I think that'll put anybody off playing and touring for life. But the Animals as a band had a huge impact in the UK and the USA. They're inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994, and also Bruce Springsteen has cited them as a real inspiration to him, and he said that every song that he's ever written was basically, we got to get out of this place. He's also said that his album Darkness on the Edge of Town is filled with animals, and a couple of his tracks, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood and Badlands, he's played those and then said afterwards, listen up kids, this is how successful theft is accomplished. So he is heavily influenced by the Animals in his writing and his playing, and it's great to hear an artist that references such a like and love of another band and how it really spoke to them as an individual, because that is what music is all about. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!